defending the free market, and making the moral case for capitalism. The Justin Moore Show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Justin Moore Show. Okay, I first need to start off this episode with a correction. On last week's episode, I was mentioning how one of the Fed governors, they were going to give a secret speech on Monday and that sort of thing. Well, this Lael Brainard, I kept referring to as a man. I mean, that's what I was assuming, you know. I guess I don't know too many Laels, if I'm even saying the first name correctly, Lael. But anyway, it turns out that it's actually a woman. So again, I apologize to Lael Brainard. I hope she doesn't, start hitting me up on Twitter and taking offense, okay? So I just wanted to make sure that that's all cleared up here. And yeah, basically what I was referring to in that episode, how this Lael Brainard, she's basically the biggest dove as one of the Fed governors. And when she gave her little speech, I mean, it sounds like she's not ready to raise interest rates either. But still, gold and silver sold off this week in anticipation to the meeting next week. So I guess we'll see what happens. But again, as I've been saying, I don't see the Federal Reserve raising interest rates in September, especially before an election. But anyway, as I promised on this episode, I wasn't going to talk about the economy because I want to focus on a topic that's been very heated. Any of you guys who get your news, actually, no. Let me make a correction here. No, I know all my listeners out there, you guys do not get your news from Facebook. Now, there's a lot of people who do. The only news they get is from their little Facebook news feed. And of course, as you scroll through your little Facebook news feed, what do you see? You see talk about the EpiPen, okay? Oh man, it's been all over the place for these last several weeks. And so what I want to do here, let's break down and let's get to the bottom of the issue with the EpiPen. And why has it skyrocketed in price? Now, basically, okay, let me just provide some very brief background in case some of you out there are like, okay, wait, what's this EpiPen thing? So just so we're all on the same page here. So basically, the company Mylan, that they own this product called the EpiPen. Now, the EpiPen, it's a syringe with certain aspects to it that make it a very safe way to deliver epinephrine. Now, epinephrine it's adrenaline. But it's what's produced in our body through the adrenaline glands. And basically what happens with people who have, say, allergic reactions, say if you're stung by a bee and you're allergic to bees, with some people, their allergic reaction, their airways close up because they swell up. And other people who have allergies, they don't have this issue. But the people that do, they need these EpiPens. They need that epinephrine immediately. And so that can help basically constrict their airways and allows them to breathe so that they don't die. Basically, this EpiPen, it's a life-saving thing. It's been around for a long time, too. Now, the thing with this epinephrine, it's incredibly cheap stuff. I mean, we're talking the amount of epinephrine you need per syringe, it's pennies we're talking about. We're talking about less than $1, maybe around 30 cents for each EpiPen is the amount of epinephrine that you need. And but the issue is, and what a lot of people are up in arms about, is how expensive the EpiPen has gotten. It's now costs over $600 for one syringe. And of course, if you're poor, I mean, how can you afford $600 for one syringe? But yeah, you want to save your kid, so it's just something you got to do, right? Well, we're going to get into that, so I don't want to totally dive in on all that. But basically, what I want to analyze, what we want to go through in this episode here, it's, well, why has the EpiPen gotten so expensive? What's caused it? And what's really the answer? And is the free market, is capitalism to blame? Is it greed? Because of course, if anyone from the left wing sort of viewpoint, that's how they're looking at this. Oh man, these companies, they just want to make a lot of money, so they just keep jacking up the prices on stuff like the EpiPen. Well, let's take a look at that. And actually, I found a piece here that actually does a really good job just kind of laying out the entire issue with the EpiPen. And it's from the New York Times. This is where this piece is from. And it's written by Aaron E. Carroll. Now, this guy's a professor at some university, I forgot. But his piece is coming here from August 23rd. Okay, so several weeks ago now. And I kind of skipped the beginning of it just because I wanted to lay out the background to make it a little more digestible. So now we're picking up on his piece here. The EpiPen isn't new. It has been in use since 1977. Research and development costs were recouped long ago. 9 years ago, it was bought by the pharmaceutical company Mylan, which then began to sell the device. When Mylan bought it, EpiPens cost about $57 each. Few competitors existed, and for various reasons, that had remained the case. The device actually worked and saved lives. People needed it. Mylan raised the price. It also began to raise awareness. Unfortunately, epinephrine is inherently unstable. Research shows that it degrades pretty quickly over time, and it's recommended that EpiPens be replaced every year. When my friend asked me if they can take an expired over-the-counter pain medication like acetaminophen or ibuprofen, I shrug and nod. If they don't get a full dose, it's usually not a big deal. But epinephrine is no joke. So here we are. The EpiPen is not some new device. It's been in use since 1977. So for decades now, okay? And originally, back in 1977, the EpiPen cost $57. And now it's costing over $600. And then the thing with epinephrine, what sucks, like with me personally, I like stocking up on stuff. I don't want to run out. Well, you can't do that with the EpiPen because the stuff expires. And, that's something you don't want to joke around with. You got to, so the pens that you do have, if you haven't used them in a year, you got to chuck them out and you got to get new ones. And so that is a thing that really sucks. You're spending now $600 a syringe. Look, you're sitting, say you have $1,200 in these things, you don't use them. Well, it's a good thing to have because you could save your kid's life or your own life. But, it sucks. You have to spend that money every single year. And now to continue on here, get this, guys. Then in 2010, federal guidelines changed to recommend that 2 EpiPens be sold in a package instead of 1. Studies showed that about 10% of children who received epinephrine from an EpiPen needed more than 1 dose. Better to be safe than sorry. Additionally, the Food and Drug Administration changed its recommendations to allow for the prescription of EpiPens for prevention for at-risk patients, not just for those with confirmed allergies. Mylan stopped selling individual EpiPens and began to sell only twin packs. Isn't this amazing, ladies and gentlemen? Here we have the government stepping in. Of course, these guys they're the good guys, right? It's like, well, really, if you want to save a kid's life, 1 dose might not be enough. So you need 2. So we're going to force you to buy 2 at a time. Yes, you can't just buy 1. And it's not like these things are cheap, right? $600 each. That's crazy. And that's the thing with government anyway. They always want to force you how much you should buy of something. It's like with me. It's like, should the government require that you go buy 30 rolls of toilet paper at a time? It's like, well, I do it. That's because when I go to Costco, that's what they have. They have 30 rolls per package. And, that lasts you a long time. So you don't have to keep going back and forth. Maybe the government would require that in the future. It's like, well, due to global warming, in the environment, we don't want you driving, to the store every single week, just to get toilet paper if you only buy a few rolls at a time. 30 rolls with a family of 5, that can at least last you a few months, I could see the government forcing us to do things like that, which, 30 rolls of toilet paper, that's kind of a silly example anyway. But you get the point. They're like looking at the healthcare industry. Look at Obamacare. These guys in government, they sound like they're such superheroes because now, thanks to Obamacare, we got these bronze plans, these silver plans, these gold plans, platinum plans, and the coverage has increased under Obamacare. So when they were trying to sell us this stuff, they're like, oh, look at all the extra things you're getting with your insurance now. It's like, but I don't want to pay for pregnancy tests. I'm a man. I cannot get pregnant, right? But no, I'm forced to pay for that. And it's like with cars. Say if you're someone, hey, you just want to get to work. You don't need the fancy stuff. You don't need the cooled seats. You don't need the lumbar massage seats. You don't need the sunroof. You'd rather just have basically a box on wheels. You have to actually roll down the window yourself. You don't have the little button you can just click down. But if you could save tens of thousands of dollars, you would probably do that, right? But if the government forces you to buy the top of the line car with all the features, and they're pointing out, well, look at all the features you get thanks to us. It's like, no, you're hurting the poor. If they really felt that they wanted all that, if it was worth the extra tens of thousands of dollars for all the features, then they would do it. But if you don't have the tens of thousands of dollars to spend, that's making you worse off. And that's the thing with government in general. Even looking at the education system, it's one size fits all. Instead of leaving it up to the individual to decide, how do I best want to spend my money? Okay, anyway, here, let's continue on here. From the New York Times. In 2013, the government went further. It passed a law that gave funding preferences for asthma treatment grants to states that maintained an emergency supply of EpiPens. As the near sole supplier of the devices, Mylan stood to make even more money. Of course, competition would bring the price down, but it's very hard to bring such a device to market. In 2012, the Adrenaclick and Twinject were discontinued. In 2013, Sanofi began to sell AviQ devices, which even gave audio instructions to walk people through their use. Unfortunately, they were found to give potential improper doses and were pulled from the shelves about a year ago. Teva had hoped to offer a generic version of the EpiPen, but concerns from the FDA sent it back to the drawing board until at least next year. Adamis hoped to offer pre-filled syringes, which would still be harder to use than the EpiPens, but it was told by the FDA that much more data would be needed before such a product could be sold. Okay, so what did I just read here? Well, that here the government, here we've had several companies trying to compete with the EpiPen. And for one reason or another, they're giving them improper doses or, these companies, these devices failed, okay? So really there's not any competition against the EpiPen, but there is one, which I'll get to later. But notice what I said. No, the very last sentence I read from the piece. It said this. Adamis hoped to offer pre-filled syringes, which would still be harder to use than EpiPens, but it was told by the FDA that much more data would be needed before such a product could be sold. That sounds quite arbitrary by the FDA, doesn't it? Let's just play out the scenario just a little bit here. Let's say that the government favors Mylan's EpiPen, okay? Just to say. And the government favors the EpiPen over all these other companies. And perhaps, I don't know, maybe Mylan, as a company, it's contributed more to political campaigns, maybe more to the Democrat Party. Maybe Mylan has more lobbyists on Capitol Hill. So, with that increased presence, and if they have donated more, it's in the government's interest to benefit the company that basically, it's the idea of you scratch my back, I scratch your back, right? That's kind of how it works, right? I mean, and then here we have a competitor, Adamis. They could have, they're a threat to the EpiPen. They're a cheaper alternative. They're just the simple pre-filled syringes is all they are. And the FDA's like, oh no, wait a minute. We need more data before we can approve your product to be sold to the public. Ladies and gentlemen, this is crony capitalism at work. This is what I have been bitching about on my show. And, Donald Trump, people point out, oh, he's a capitalist. No, he's a crony capitalist. This is how business is done in America today. The government really does. It runs like a mob. Hey, if you don't want us to burn down your building, you better donate to us. And that's allowing you just to play the game, okay? And you got to keep contributing. And, the more bones you throw our way, we're going to keep your competitors off your back. That really is. That is a mob mentality. And that is how the government works. That is why I have such a problem with how things are done today and how it is not capitalism. And the things that Bernie Sanders points out of what's wrong with the system, he's right to a large degree. Yes, Bernie. But that isn't capitalism. What's voluntary about that? This is government getting in bed with big business. But anyway, here, let's continue on with the piece. Get this. These setbacks all in the last year have once again left Mylan with a veritable run of the market. It raised the price of EpiPens again. As of this May, they cost more than $600 a pack. Since 2004, after adjusting for inflation, the price of EpiPens has risen more than 450%. Okay, I guess I should make a correction of what I've been saying earlier in the episode here. I was pointing out the EpiPen, I was thinking just one was $600. But from what I just read right here, the twin pack costs $600. So you're looking at $300 per syringe, okay? So I apologize for that. But so now, isn't that crazy though? The EpiPen, since 2004, this is in 12 years, the price of the EpiPen has gone up 450%. How does that make any sense? With any other thing in the economy, especially places where the government's not really involved. I mean, think of technology for the large part. The government's been hands off. Internet prices are coming down. Computers get cheaper. TVs are getting cheaper. TVs that used to cost $10,000 are now you can get less than $500 today, just in a few years. Blu-ray players, when they first came out, they cost over $1,000 for each one. Now you can get a Blu-ray player for about $30 today. But here we have the EpiPen. Something that's not a new product. It's been around since 1977. And here it is. It's gone up 450% in 12 years. Especially as you become more efficient, the production process becomes refined, prices should come down. In a free market, that is how it works. But no, not in this instance. And then again, and this is what we also point out, especially free market types, how the healthcare system we have today, this is not capitalism. This is not a free market at all. This is the crony capitalism. This is why the EpiPen, this is such a perfect example of the problems with our healthcare system. And now getting back to picking on Bernie Sanders types, they would argue, oh, well, see, this company is greedy. The reason, look at how the EpiPen used to cost $57 in 1977, and now today it costs over $300 for a single pen. That's because these companies, they just want to make a lot of money. So if they can just keep raising prices off the backs of the poor, well, they're going to do it because all they care about is green, right? They just care about money. But this is where that analysis breaks down and how it falls apart. Because, again, it gets back to what I was alluding to earlier, how it's the problem with our healthcare system. It has nothing to do with capitalism. It is crony capitalism. It's the companies like Mylan, they're greasing the palms of the FDA. It's this cozy relationship between big business, Mylan, and government, the FDA. That is the problem. And just go look at any of these other companies or look at, Donald Trump. When you're dealing with real estate in New York City, guess what? You've got to be cozy with the politicians if you want to get approval for your buildings. With all the codes and restrictions, I mean, you have to work with the politicians. So, really in defense of Donald Trump, he's doing what he has to do, right? But unfortunately, I think Donald Trump sees that this is just capitalism. This is just how you do it, okay? And I think if he was president, I definitely don't think he would reform the system. He'll just continue on with how things are, right? But anyway, back to the EpiPen and how the costs have gone up. Why? So the question we have to ask, okay, so if the Bernie Sanders supporters are wrong, that it's not greed that caused the EpiPen to go up in cost, why has the EpiPen gone up? Okay, it comes down to a few things. If we're to look at this from the free market point of view here, the first question you have to ask is, well, where's the competition? I just read from the New York Times piece pointing out how one competitor after another have been eliminated thanks to the FDA not getting approval, or there's not enough data. So the EpiPen is largely without competition. So it can raise prices because it doesn't have that check against it. It doesn't have a cheaper alternative, which actually there is one cheaper alternative, which I'm just about to get to. But also, what also causes the EpiPen to cost more? Well, look at the healthcare industry in general. Look at all the regulations and hoops these biotech companies have to go through to get approval. Again, you're paying off a bunch of lobbyists, these government officials, the FDA. You have to go through all these required tests. And, over a year ago when I was talking about healthcare on my show, I made the point that, on average, for a drug to get approved and to be on store shelves, it has to go through 10 years of testing, and it costs over $1 billion. That's the approval process it has to go through to get a drug on the market, a life-saving drug. So here you have people dying, but here's a drug that was created 10 years ago. So how many people does the government have to kill until someone can receive that drug? Okay, sure, the drug, there could be some side effects you don't know about yet, but I mean, if you're dying, do you really care? And obviously, I think there's the government likes to overdo things anyway, right? that is it really going to cost $1 billion to approve a drug? Well, I mean, the government thinks so. The government, they're pencil pushers. These bureaucrats. There is no, they don't. I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. When the government and the bureaucracy is all about filling out forms and just going through a certain process. You just have to go through the bureaucratic process, which is a complete nightmare. And is it really effective? No, it's not. You're just signing a bunch of forms and paying off politicians. But anyway, so when the cost of the EpiPen is $300 today, who does that affect the most? How many poor people can afford that? But so the EpiPen costs $300, but now thanks to the government regulations, they're like, oh, actually you got to sell it as a twin pack, so you're spending $600. How many poor people can afford $600 for 2 syringes of EpiPen? Not too many. Remember I've brought up the statistic on my show. More than 60% of Americans don't have more than $1,000 in their savings account. More than 60%. Well, here you're spending $600 on just 2 EpiPens. I mean, sure. I thought these politicians are trying to help the poor, right? Huh. That falls on deaf ears, doesn't it? But in all fairness, okay, so I was bringing up earlier how the EpiPen, they do have a competitor. And let me just read from the New York Times piece, and this will shed some light on that. An alternative still exists. The Adrenaclick, while still not cheap, is back and less expensive than the EpiPen. Some think it's harder to use, though it's not on the accepted list for many health insurance plans. More important, few physicians think of it because of that. They write prescriptions for EpiPens. Since the Adrenaclick is not a generic version of the EpiPen, pharmacists can't substitute one for the other. A prescription for an EpiPen must be filled with an EpiPen, regardless of what consumers might want. Okay. Huh. So remember how I was talking about the crony capitalism at work? What I just read to you is more examples of this cronyism in action. So here we have an alternative, Adrenaclick. It's cheaper than EpiPen. And when these pharmacists go to write out prescriptions, because, it's not on the approved list or a lot of physicians don't know about Adrenaclick, when you fill out a prescription writing EpiPen, you can't substitute it because they don't consider Adrenaclick to be an alternative to EpiPen. So you have to get an EpiPen for an EpiPen prescription, right? And what I just read from the New York Times there, the Adrenaclick, it's not on the accepted list for the insurance companies. Huh. So now since we have the government running insurance companies, thanks to Obamacare, that gives the government a lot more power, doesn't it? When the government insurance company can decide, what drugs should we allow on our accepted list that are covered by our insurance? Let's see, which companies have donated the most to the party in power, the Democrats? They're going through all this thing. Okay, yep, we can approve that drug. This is how the government likes it. They want to be in positions of power over private business. Again, what I brought up earlier, the government runs like the mob. You want to be in business? You got to pay up, buddy. And here's EpiPen. They're cozy with government. Oh man, the government loves EpiPen. They're keeping away competitors for them. They're on the approved list for insurance companies. So if you got your insurance, it'll cover the cost of the EpiPen. But of course, some people with high deductible healthcare plans, guess what? You're paying out of pocket for the EpiPen. But this EpiPen story, it's a lot bigger than I think what a lot of people gave credit to. Especially with the Bernie Sanders supporters. Oh yeah, it's all about greed. But no, this is showing us we're looking at a little peephole into the system. This is how sick the system is. This is how it works. Right here. Here's one small example, EpiPen. One of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of examples are out there. But here's just one. And this is how you hurt the poor. The people who need it the most can't get access to it thanks to government regulations and all the cronyism going on, and that results in a lack of competition. And EpiPen is allowed to function because they have a monopoly, a government-granted monopoly. But of course, monopolies, they're bad. But the government creates monopolies all the time. Government-favored businesses, Mylan. Now, here's how this guy, Aaron, finishes his piece from the New York Times. But those are unsatisfactory arguments. Epinephrine isn't an elective medication. It doesn't last, so people need to purchase the drug repeatedly. There's little competition, but there are huge hurdles to enter the market. So a company can raise the price again and again with little pushback. The government encourages the product's use, but makes no effort to control its costs. Insurance coverage shields some from the expense, allowing higher prices, but leaves those most at risk, most exposed to extreme out-of-pocket outlays. The poor are the most likely to consider going without because they can't afford it. EpiPens are a perfect example of a healthcare nightmare. They're also just a typical example of the dysfunction of the American healthcare system. Okay, what he just said here is largely what I've just been covering as I went off on my little tangents. But there's one thing I have to take issue with how he finished his piece here. He makes the point that the government encourages the product's use, but makes no effort to control its costs. Now, that's completely wrong-headed right there. Trying to get the government to control its costs, that's not the right way you go about it. What? Impose price controls? I mean, anyone who understands basic economics, price controls always leads to shortages. And the people who need access to it aren't going to be able to get it. The only people who do get something through shortages are, again, those who are connected with government, those who have means, so the rich. You have to function in a black market at that point. And so he's wrong-headed there, but everything else, I think he's right on point. And it really is. This is the problem with our healthcare system and just with government and big business getting in bed in general. But now there's one thing that I didn't address yet on the show. And I haven't heard anyone really talk about in regards to the EpiPen. Why also it's expensive. So we've already talked about how the lack of competition has made it expensive, government regulations in regards to healthcare. But there's one other reason. The one other reason is patents. EpiPen has had a patent since 1977. Patents, I mean, there's a lot of people who disagree with this, but I don't think there should be such thing as patents at all. They shouldn't exist. Patents are a government-granted monopoly. That's what they are, pure and simple. And because of EpiPen's patent, they're allowed to function like a monopoly. Where basically it's the patent attorneys who go and who are writing, when they're filling out these patent forms to get their approval, it's in their interest to make the patents as broad as possible. That's exactly what they do. They want to be able to sue the hell out of anybody who tries to copy what EpiPen has done. Now, EpiPen, all it is a damn syringe. But sure, there is, simple little gadgets in it that's made it so it's safer to inject a dose of epinephrine as opposed to a normal syringe. There's certain safety features on it, little triggers. But it's still a very simple device. It's a syringe, for God's sakes. But anyone who tries to copy it, guess what? They're going to get sued by Mylan because they're violating Mylan's patent. And that is a big problem. And now, of course, with patents, could you argue like, well, Justin, you can't be against patents because we wouldn't have any. Look at all the technology we've had as a result of patents. But you have to look at it in terms of costs. Okay, having patents in place, has that led to more inventions? Perhaps it's led to a small degree of more inventions. It's not like all inventions are covered by patents. There's not. There's some industries that are not covered at all. So, of course, people who are going to focus their inventions are going to focus on where you can get patents, and that's exactly what's happened. So these people who argue for patents, so you're telling me without them, these businesses wouldn't create them, wouldn't invent new products? Really? Because of competition, don't you want to outcompete your competitors? Absolutely. You don't need a patent to do that. You want to beat out the competition. But when the government grants you a monopoly with a time frame, and no one's allowed to copy your idea of how to administer a drug, that keeps prices of those devices artificially high. And that's what's happened with the EpiPen. Without this patent, there would be so much more competition than there is. That's why there's such a lack of competition for the EpiPen. Because they can't make it exactly like the EpiPen. So the other alternatives aren't as safe. So they're trying to work around the patent. Which, of course, as I just mentioned, it's in the company's interest to make the patents as general as possible, so that you can sue as many people as possible, so you can, litigate it in court, so you can get some money. This is how business is done in America today. People scratch their heads and wonder why. Healthcare costs are rising. why it seems like we're going to hell in a handbasket. Well, it's a result of government intervention in the economy. We don't have an unhampered market like I want. We don't have a free market like I talk about on my show here. That's what we need. That's what we need to get back to. The internet has been one of the freest markets we've had, and now the government stepped in with that. But look at all the things you can find on the internet. Look at how cheap everything is. You can buy products from Amazon. 2 days later, it shows up at your door. Look at all the access to information you can get on the internet. And a lot of it's free. That is a free market, my friends. A free market is the answer. And you want to have more life-saving drugs like EpiPen, but at a cheaper cost. We need less government and more of a free market. And I that's all I have for you guys today. I just thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you got a lot out of this. Just really quickly, guys, don't stop me yet. Just go to my website, catch up on old episodes, justinmooreshow.com. More is spelled M-O-H-R. You know, my most recent episode is right there in the middle of the webpage. You can also find my show on iTunes, Google Play Store, all over the place. And if you guys can make your Amazon purchases through my website, that'd be awesome. I have an Amazon little widget there. You just click on that little banner, and it takes you right to Amazon's homepage. Any goods you buy, I get a small commission back. It costs you nothing extra. It helps me out, helps keep me afloat. So if I ever have to buy an EpiPen in the future, I can, you know. But anyway, guys, please, if you could do that for me, I would greatly appreciate it. I'll be leaving for the Contra cruise here in a few weeks. But anyway, we have the Federal Reserve with their meeting coming up September 20th and 21st. We'll see what happens there. Will they raise interest rates? Oh, no. Well, tune in here and we'll talk about it. In the meantime, guys, I will talk with all you guys next week, and I'm looking forward to it. This is Justin Moore, signing off.